My name is Rabbi Jacob Stein, and for 62 years I believed I understood the depths of faith and the purpose of life. Born and raised in a devout Jewish community, I dedicated my life to studying the Torah and guiding others in their spiritual journeys. I thought I knew the truth, unshakable, clear, and absolute. My world revolved around tradition, scripture, and the unwavering belief in the coming of the Messiah. But despite my faith, there was a restlessness in my soul, a quiet doubt I buried under years of rituals and teaching. My congregation admired me, my family relied on me, and I thought I had all the answers. Yet, nothing could have prepared me for the day that changed everything. I thought I was ready to meet my Creator, but what I experienced when my heart stopped beating shattered everything I believed. What I saw beyond the veil was more astonishing and terrifying than I could have ever imagined. It was a crisp Friday evening, just before Shabbat. I had finished preparing my sermon and was rushing home to light the candles with my family. The air carried the faint smell of autumn leaves, and the streets of our small neighborhood were peaceful as usual. But peace can be deceptive, and life can change in the blink of an eye. As I crossed the intersection near the synagogue, I heard the deafening screech of tires. Time seemed to slow. I turned my head just in time to see a car barreling toward me, its headlights blindingly bright. I froze, paralyzed by the inevitability of what was about to happen. The impact was violent, a force I could never have imagined. The sound of crunching metal, the sharp sting of broken glass, and then nothing. Everything went dark, but it wasn't just an absence of light. It was a void, an emptiness that consumed everything around me. My body felt weightless, as if I were floating in an endless abyss, and then, as suddenly as the darkness came, it was replaced by something else entirely, a place I couldn't recognize but felt hauntingly familiar. I wasn't alone, and what I saw next shook me to my core. When I opened my eyes, or perhaps it wasn't my eyes at all, I found myself in a place that defied explanation. The void I had drifted through gave way to a landscape both alien and hauntingly familiar. The air, if it could be called that, felt heavy, dense with a strange energy that pressed down on my very being. The ground beneath me seemed to shift and writhe like a living thing, yet when I reached out to touch it, it was solid, cold, and unyielding. A dim, reddish glow illuminated the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows that twisted and flickered as though alive. The silence was suffocating, broken only by a faint hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I felt exposed, as though unseen eyes were watching me, scrutinizing every corner of my soul. I tried to move, but my legs felt like lead. Every step forward was an act of will. As I walked, images began to materialize around me, ghostly visions that flickered in and out like projections on a screen. They weren't just random scenes. They were moments from my life. My first day as a rabbi, the birth of my children, and even small, mundane memories I had long forgotten. But not all of them were pleasant. There were arguments with my wife, harsh words I'd spoken in anger, and the faces of people I had turned away in their moments of need. Each image struck me like a physical blow, a stark reminder of my failings and humanity. I wanted to look away, to run, but something compelled me to face these moments. Then came the voices. They were faint at first, whispers that seemed to echo from within the very fabric of this strange place. "You thought you knew the truth?" one voice said, cold and accusing. "But did you ever question what lies beyond your certainty?" I tried to speak, but no sound came out. My thoughts raced as the whispers grew louder, overlapping until they became a cacophony. And then, as if answering my silent plea, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was my father, long departed, his face etched with both love and sorrow. "Jacob," he said, his voice steady yet filled with a weight I couldn't comprehend. "You've come to a place where all illusions are stripped away. What you see here is the truth, not the truth you wanted, but the truth you need." I felt my knees buckle as I reached out to him, desperate for answers. "Father, where am I? What is this place?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped aside, revealing a vast chasm that seemed to stretch infinitely downward. From its depths rose cries, human voices filled with anguish and despair. I felt my heart tighten as I gazed into the abyss. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't turn away. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "This," my father said, "is the weight of what's been left undone, the prayers unanswered, the kindness withheld. It is the place where truth confronts you, where there is no hiding from what you've sown." Suddenly, I was no longer standing by the chasm. I was falling into it. The descent was endless, and the cries around me grew louder. Each voice seemed to call my name, accusing me, begging me, pleading with me. I couldn't tell if they were real or figments of my imagination. I landed in a place that could only be described as a labyrinth of shadows. The walls pulsed with an otherworldly energy, and the ground beneath me felt as if it were alive, shifting with every step. Figures began to appear in the shadows. Faces I recognized. There was Miriam, the widow from my congregation, who had come to me in tears, seeking comfort after her son's death. I had offered her platitudes, but dismissed her pain too quickly, thinking I had more important matters to attend to. "You didn't listen," she said, her voice echoing with a sorrow that pierced my soul. "You spoke of faith, but you didn't see me." Next was Isaac, a young man who had come to me, questioning his faith and seeking guidance. I had dismissed his doubts, insisting he simply pray harder and trust in God. Now, his face was filled with anguish. "You had the answers," he said, his voice a mix of anger and despair. "But you didn't share them. You left me to wander alone." Each encounter chipped away at my defenses, forcing me to confront the ways I had failed those who had trusted me. The labyrinth seemed to stretch endlessly, each corner revealing another face, another story, another regret. Then, the landscape shifted again. I found myself standing before a massive gate, carved with intricate symbols that seemed to shift and change as I looked at them. A figure stood before it, a presence so overwhelming that I could hardly bear to look. It wasn't a man or an angel, but something beyond comprehension. Its form seemed to flicker between light and shadow, and its voice resonated within me rather than through the air. "Jacob Stein," it said, addressing me by name. "You stand at the crossroads of judgment and mercy. What you see beyond this gate will reveal the truth of the Messiah and the fulfillment of all promises. Are you prepared to face what lies ahead?" Tears streamed down my face as I fell to my knees. "I don't know," I whispered. "I thought I knew the truth, but now I'm not sure of anything." The figure extended a hand, and as I reached out, the gate began to open. A blinding light poured through, and within it I saw shapes, glimpses of something so profound it shook me to my core. I braced myself for what was to come, knowing that whatever lay ahead would change me forever. The light was overwhelming, a brilliance that seemed to pierce through every fiber of my being. It wasn't just brightness, it was warmth, knowledge, and presence all at once. I felt as though every secret I had ever kept, every sin I had ever committed, was laid bare under its gaze. There was no hiding here, no pretense. From within the light, a figure emerged. It was neither male nor female, and yet it carried the essence of both. Its form was cloaked in a radiance that seemed alive, shifting and shimmering like a living flame. I couldn't bring myself to look directly at it, but even averting my gaze, I felt its eyes, if it had eyes, piercing through to the core of my soul. "Jacob," it said, its voice unlike anything I had ever heard. It wasn't sound as much as it was a resonance, vibrating through me and filling the very air. "You stand at the threshold of understanding, where all that is hidden is revealed. Are you ready to see the truth?" I trembled, my knees buckling beneath me. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I am the Alpha and the Omega," the figure replied, its tone carrying the weight of eternity. The Creator and Sustainer. I have come to show you what your heart has long sought, but your mind refused to accept. Tears streamed down my face as I struggled to comprehend what was happening. Why me? Why now? Because your heart has been divided, Jacob, the figure said, stepping closer. You have clung to the law, but ignored the Spirit. You have spoken of the Messiah, yet you have not prepared your heart for his return. The words hit me like a thunderclap, shaking the very ground beneath my feet. My entire life, my teachings, my beliefs, everything I had held sacred felt as though it was being unraveled. What are you saying? I asked, my voice cracking with desperation. Are you telling me that I've been wrong? The figure extended a hand, and in an instant, the space around us transformed. I was no longer standing in the blinding light, but in a small, dimly lit room. Before me stood a man, humble in appearance, yet there was something about him that radiated authority and peace. This, the figure said, gesturing to the man, is the one you have spoken of, the one your heart has longed for, but your eyes have failed to see. I stared at the man, my mind racing. Who are you? I asked, though deep down I already knew the answer. The man stepped forward, his eyes filled with a compassion so profound it nearly brought me to my knees. I am the way, the truth, and the life, he said. I am the fulfillment of the promises you have waited for. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened as the weight of his words sank in. The Messiah, I whispered, my voice trembling. But how? How could I not have seen? The man reached out, placing a hand on my shoulder. Because you looked with your mind and not your heart. You sought a conqueror when you should have sought a shepherd. You spoke of righteousness, but ignored mercy. The room seemed to spin as the truth began to take hold. Everything I had believed, everything I had taught, it all seemed so small, so incomplete. Why now? I asked, tears streaming down my face. Why show me this now, when it feels too late? It is never too late, the man said, his voice steady and filled with hope. You have been given this moment not as punishment, but as grace. What you do with it is your choice. The weight of his words pressed down on me, and I felt myself breaking under the enormity of it all. My life flashed before my eyes, not just the actions, but the intentions, the moments of pride and arrogance, the opportunities for kindness I had ignored. I'm not worthy, I said, collapsing to my knees. I've failed. I've failed you. I've failed my family. I've failed my faith. The man knelt beside me, his presence overwhelming yet comforting. No one is worthy, Jacob, but it is not about worthiness. It is about grace. You have been shown the truth because your heart was searching for it, even when you didn't realize it. The light returned, enveloping us both, and the figure's voice echoed once more. You have seen the truth, Jacob. Now, the choice is yours. Will you continue to walk in the shadows of the law, or will you step into the light of grace? I hesitated, fear and doubt gripping me. What lay ahead if I accepted this revelation? What would it mean for everything I had ever known? The light pulsed around me as if it were alive, waiting for my answer. My thoughts were a storm, years of tradition, teachings, and deeply ingrained beliefs clashing with the profound truth now laid bare before me. Could I truly accept this? Could I let go of everything I thought I knew? I looked up at the man before me, the one who had claimed to be the fulfillment of all I had waited for. His eyes, those piercing, compassionate eyes, seemed to hold all the answers I had ever sought. Yet I hesitated. What will happen to my family, my congregation? I asked, my voice trembling. If I embrace this truth, I will lose everything. The man's gaze softened, and he placed his hand on my shoulder again. To lose the world is to gain eternity, he said. The truth does not come without sacrifice, but what is lost pales in comparison to what is found. The choice is not about what you leave behind, but about who you become moving forward. His words resonated deep within me, but fear still gripped my heart. But what if I fail again? What if I'm not strong enough to walk this path? Strength is not something you must bring. It is something given, he said. The journey is not about perfection, but transformation. You have been shown the truth, not because you are perfect, but because you are loved. That love will carry you, even when you stumble. Tears flowed freely now, and I felt my soul beginning to crack open under the weight of his words. It wasn't just the words themselves, but the undeniable power behind them, the feeling of being fully known, fully seen, and yet fully loved. I've spent my entire life waiting for the Messiah, I said, my voice breaking, but I never believed it could be you. He nodded, his expression calm and understanding. Many wait for me, but few truly seek me. The law and the prophets spoke of me, but the heart must see what the mind cannot. A wave of memories washed over me again. Times I had preached about the coming of the Messiah. Times I had argued with others about what his arrival would look like. And now, here he was, not as a conqueror or a king, but as a servant and a shepherd. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice small and vulnerable. "Follow me," he said simply. "Leave behind the weight of your pride and your fear. Walk in the light of grace and truth. Share what you now know, so that others may also see." His words were both an invitation and a challenge. I knew that to follow him would mean everything in my life would change. My congregation, my family, my identity as a rabbi, it would all be turned upside down. But as I knelt there, feeling the warmth of his presence and the truth of his words, I realized something profound. I couldn't go back. The truth was too powerful, too undeniable. To reject it would be to deny the very essence of my soul. "I'll follow you," I said, my voice barely a whisper but filled with conviction. "But I don't know how." "You've already begun," he said, helping me to my feet. "The path will unfold before you, one step at a time. Trust in the light, and it will guide you." The light around us began to intensify, growing brighter and brighter until I could no longer see anything but its brilliance. His voice echoed in my mind as the scene around me faded. "You are loved, Jacob. Remember that always. You are loved." And then, in an instant, it was gone. I gasped as I felt my body slam back into itself. The harsh fluorescent lights of a hospital room replaced the brilliance I had just witnessed. Machines beeped around me, and the voices of nurses filled the air. My chest ached, my body felt heavy, and my mind struggled to grasp what had just happened. But my heart knew. It had seen the truth. It had felt the love of the one I had waited for all my life. I closed my eyes, tears streaming down my face as I whispered the words I had never spoken before. "Thank you, Messiah." The days following my return to the living were unlike anything I had ever experienced. Lying in that hospital bed, I couldn't stop replaying what I had seen, heard, and felt during those moments beyond the veil. My body ached from the accident, but it was nothing compared to the weight now pressing on my spirit, the weight of transformation. The nurses and doctors called it a miracle. By all accounts, I shouldn't have survived the crash. Yet here I was, battered but breathing. My family gathered around me, their faces etched with relief and worry. My wife, Sarah, held my hand tightly, tears streaking her cheeks. "We thought we lost you," she whispered, her voice breaking. I squeezed her hand weakly and tried to find the words to explain what had happened. But how could I? How could I tell her that I had seen the truth about the Messiah, the one truth that would shatter everything we had believed and built our lives around? I saw something," I began hesitantly, my voice hoarse. "Something I can't explain." Her eyes searched mine, filled with concern and curiosity. "What do you mean?" she asked. Before I could answer, my eldest son, Aaron, interrupted. "Abba, you need to rest. We can talk about everything later." I nodded, grateful for the reprieve. But deep down, I knew there would be no escaping this conversation. Not with them, not with my congregation, and not with myself. As the days turned into weeks, I began to recover physically. Yet the spiritual and emotional journey was just beginning. I spent hours alone in my study, poring over the Torah and the prophets, searching for the Messiah I had encountered in the near-death experience. Passages I had read 1,000 times before suddenly took on new meaning. Isaiah's words about the suffering servant leapt off the page. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. He was pierced for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities. How had I not seen it before? The truth had been there all along, hidden in plain sight. One night, as I sat surrounded by open books and scribbled notes, Sarah came into the room. She closed the door softly behind her and sat across from me. "You've been distant," she said gently. "Even more so than usual. I know you're struggling with something, Jacob. Please, let me in." Her words broke something in me. For the first time since the accident, I allowed myself to truly open up. I told her everything, every detail of the accident, the abyss, the voices, the figure of light, and the one who had claimed to be the Messiah. When I finished, the room was silent except for the sound of my ragged breathing. Sarah's face was pale, her hands trembling as she clasped them together. "Do you know what you're saying?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I do," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging within me. "And I know what it will mean for us, for our family, for the life we've built. But I can't deny what I saw, Sarah. I can't deny him." She stared at me for what felt like an eternity, her eyes searching mine for some hint of doubt, some sign that I was mistaken. But there was none. Finally, she spoke. "If what you say is true, Jacob, then everything we've believed is different now. Everything changes." "Yes," I said, tears streaming down my face. "But it's not the end, Sarah. It's a new beginning." Sarah's tears mirrored my own as we sat there, holding each other in the quiet of our home. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of unity between us. Not the unity of shared traditions or obligations, but a deeper connection rooted in vulnerability and truth. The days that followed were some of the most challenging of my life. The burden of sharing what I had experienced weighed heavily on me. How would my congregation react? What would my family think as I delved deeper into this new understanding of faith? The following Shabbat, I stood before my congregation, my heart pounding. I had spent years standing at this bema, delivering sermons with confidence and authority. But today was different. Today, I wasn't the teacher. I was the student, humbled by a truth greater than myself. As I looked out at the faces of my community, people I had known for decades, people who trusted me as their spiritual leader, I felt an overwhelming wave of love and responsibility. They deserved the truth, even if it was difficult for them to hear. "My friends," I began, my voice trembling, "something happened to me recently, something that has changed the way I understand our faith and the promises we have long awaited. I was in an accident, and for a brief moment, I crossed into a place beyond this world. What I saw there was unlike anything I've ever experienced." The room was silent, the air thick with tension. I took a deep breath and continued. In that place, I encountered the Messiah, not as a vision or a symbol, but as a reality, a person who spoke to me, who revealed truths I had never dared to consider. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and I could see the shock and disbelief on their faces. Some looked confused, others angry, but a few seemed genuinely curious. Their eyes locked on me with intense focus. "I know this may be difficult to accept," I said, my voice steadying. It was difficult for me as well, but I cannot deny what I saw and heard. The Messiah is not merely an idea or a future hope. He is real, and he has already come to fulfill the promises we have waited for. A murmur spread through the congregation, growing louder with each passing second. One man, a respected elder named Reuben, stood up and raised his hand. "Rabbi Stein," he said, his voice calm but firm, "are you suggesting that the Messiah has already come? That everything we have been waiting for is already fulfilled?" I nodded, meeting his gaze. "Yes, Reuben, that is exactly what I'm saying. The Messiah has come, and he calls us not to wait, but to follow." Reuben's face darkened, and he shook his head. "This is blasphemy," he said, his voice rising. "You've been deceived, Rabbi. Whatever you saw was not the Messiah. It was a trick, a test of your faith." Others in the congregation began to murmur in agreement, their voices blending into a chorus of dissent. My heart ached as I listened, but I knew this moment would come. "Please," I said, raising my hands for calm. "I don't expect you to believe me without question, but I ask you to consider this. What if the Messiah has already fulfilled his mission? What if the light we have waited for is already shining, and we have been too blind to see it?" The room fell silent again, though the tension was palpable. I could see the struggle in their faces, the battle between tradition and the possibility of a new truth. After the service, some congregants approached me quietly, asking questions and seeking clarity. Others left in anger, their trust in me shaken. It was a painful but necessary step on the path I had chosen. At home, Sarah and I continued to wrestle with the implications of what I had shared. The conversations with our children were even more difficult. Aaron, ever pragmatic, refused to believe. "This isn't what we've been taught, Abba," he said, his tone sharp. "You're risking everything for something you can't prove." "I know it's hard to understand," I told him, "but sometimes the truth isn't about what we can prove. It's about what we know deep in our souls." Not everyone would understand. Not everyone would follow. But I had made my choice. In the weeks and months that followed, my life began to change in ways I couldn't have imagined. My sermons became less about rigid adherence to the law and more about love, grace, and the transformative power of faith. I lost members of my congregation, but I also gained new ones. People who were hungry for something deeper, something real. And through it all, I held on to the memory of that moment in the light, that encounter with the Messiah who had changed everything. His words echoed in my heart every day. "You are loved. Remember that always." I didn't have all the answers, but I no longer needed them. For the first time in my life, I was walking in faith, trusting not in my own understanding, but in the grace and truth I had been shown. And as I continued on this journey, one thing became clear. My life was no longer my own. It belonged to Him, the one who had called me out of the shadows and into the light.